Coming up on More Than Before.
As long as you're batting 36 out of 42 of the week, you're doing great. Have the pizza, enjoy it, eat the cheeseburger, but have the salad too.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today is going to be so much fun. A little over a year ago, I got to meet our guest at an influencer event in Tennessee. He really is an awesome guy. He is the owner of Streaker's Window Cleaning, and he is the podcast host of Life in the Meantime. He is full of life, encouragement, passion. He's hiked 53 miles through Glacier National Park, which I think that's about 52 miles further than I would probably ever hike. He is a husband, a father, a powerful change agent for men who want to enjoy the here while they are getting there, which is why I think he's so perfect for More Than Before. Timmy Riggs, welcome to the program, brother. I am so excited to have you on today. How are you?
Good, man. Thank you, Nathan. That was super encouraging and nice. And I knew you were going to do a nice intro, and it still exceeded my expectations. So I appreciate that. And I'm excited to chat with you.
You know, we met a year ago, and it was funny. We kind of just ran into each other a little bit, didn't talk that much. And then over the course of the year, as I've been following your social media and seeing what you do, I feel like I know you really, really well. And we always kind of have that perception through social media. But then when you really get with the person, things kind of change. You have a connection of heart. So I'm really excited to dive into your story. Before we jump into maybe where it all began, I'd love to dive into where you are today. What are you doing nowadays? What are you looking forward to right now in the future? What's going on in your life?
Yeah, it's kind of two-part. So one, I'm married, like you said. We're about to hit our 9-year anniversary this fall, which is crazy, blows my mind. I was looking at some pictures. It's really weird. Like, I'll tell my wife, I'm like, man, when I look at pictures, like even 2 years ago, I looked 18, and I'm 31 right now. And I kind of look 31, and I'm like, so what happened? And she's like, we had our first kid. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. So we have a almost 3-year-old. So in June, she'll be 3. And then we had a little boy in January 12th. And so Teddy Jane is our little girl and Chapman Wild is our little boy. They're doing awesome. Those first couple months of having a kid are tough. But I'll say this. My wife's focus, no matter what, was we're gonna be serious about sleep. We're gonna do good sleep training, and so I have become an evangelist for this sleep training program. Everyone has different philosophies, and I would never push down anyone's throat. But we did Moms on Call for both of our kids, okay? And it's just, you can look it up. I won't even tell you about it, so no one can judge me until the podcast is over. But basically, starting at 12 weeks for both our kids, they slept through the night, still do. We put them down at 7. They wake up at 7. And so I tell every young parent, give it a try, because you hear horror stories of sleeping, and so that's like my personal part of my life in the sense of balancing that. For the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, I have been running my window cleaning pressure washing business, which is Streaker's Window Cleaning. And we also do custom Christmas lights. So that's like 50% of our yearly revenue, which you make in like a month and a half, which means I don't sleep. Like it is. I mean, I work from morning to midnight because you're doing all the paperwork when you get home and stuff. But that evolved out of, I was first a pastor for 6 years, and we'll maybe get into that, but I was a college pastor and you don't make any money. And I always kind of say like, hey, if you're going into ministry to make money, you're a bad person, because if you end up making a lot of money on accident, I'm cool with that. If it was your goal to make money through ministry, yeah, I want to check your principles and values. And
that's the reason why you never wanted to go into ministry, right? Because you wanted to make a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. So I knew I was already a conundrum, and so, well, yeah, I see what you're saying. I wasn't trying to go. I did still want to make a lot of money. So I figured out I needed to have some side hustles. And that's where Streakers came out of. And really, it was a perfect storm. I was a pretty good sized church. And so people knew I didn't make a lot of money. And so then they would hire me to clean their windows. And so I created a pretty strong contact list for that company. And about 2.5 years ago, I had opportunities to be a senior pastor. And I just it just didn't feel like me. And so I've also kind of led to even more no's and yeses, which eventually was me jumping full time to do streakers. And even when I jumped, 2.5 years ago to today, I always tell people my goal is not necessarily to build the world's largest window cleaning company. Some days, when I crush it, I think maybe it should be, but most of the time it's the thing to get to the thing. So I'm running streakers. And then right now I am ultimately trying to build a brand called In the Meantime, which is primarily focused towards men, young men, 18 to 40-ish, no cap on the age. And it's going to be a coaching company, media company, and experience company. And so that's what I'm working on.
I love that. I mean, you have so much going on in your life. Being a father seems like it's a full-time job. And then you add a job on top of that, and you're like, okay. But then you decide, oh, well, how about being an entrepreneur? I don't know.
Yeah, I might be sick.
You might be sick mentally. And then when you decide, well, one entrepreneur thing isn't enough. Let's do something else. And all of a sudden you start adding on. But I do love how your values are so sound. Like you know exactly where you stand in a lot of things. And you've drawn that line that you're not going to cross it, family first. And, business is important, but it's not everything. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really fascinating. And especially that the dichotomy of wanting to be in ministry, but also wanting to make money. There's something to that, especially in a Christian world where, Christians don't feel like you can make money. Otherwise you're doing something evil. You've made some kind of pact with the devil, right? So I'm sure that's going to come up in our conversation, but I'm curious, how long have you been in Oklahoma City then?
So grew up in Florida, and besides the fact that I love my life now, the biggest mistake I've ever made was leaving Florida.
And you don't know it in the moment, do you? Because my wife grew up in Florida and she hated Florida. She's like, this is awful. And then she moved, and like 5 years later, she's like, I miss Florida. Why did we ever leave?
Yeah. Well, and I didn't hate it. I loved it. I was a Florida boy. We were 5 miles from the beach. I was at the beach like every day after school. Like I was Florida through and through. Even when I came, like I wore a bathing suit. Okay. Other than going to school, all I ever wore was a bathing suit. And so I come out to the Midwest, a private Christian university, and we'd be out on the lawn, where everyone gathers, and I wouldn't be wearing a shirt. And people were like, hey man, like you should probably put a shirt on. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like the UV levels are really low today. And they're like, well, it's just indecent. I'm like, what? Like I was just so used to a different lifestyle, different culture, Yeah. But I came out to Oklahoma City. It's called Southern Nazarene University. I played football. I was a quarterback, but in college, I never saw the field. I didn't have the discipline. I was kind of a small guy. In high school, you can get away with it because I was fast, in college, everyone's fast and big. And so it's Division II. And the bottom line is physically between Division II and Division I, there's a difference. But really, it has to do more with just like, what guys' academics looked like, or, maybe some of their discipline, and maybe that's why they didn't go D1. So you still had a lot of like D1 athletes on the field. And in practice, I was on the scout team, and you're just getting drilled all the time. Okay. So even as a quarterback, like they technically weren't allowed to touch me, but they'd still tackle me,
Make sure you're alive.
Like, yeah, like I don't think I'm motivated to actually see the field because those guys are going to be trying way harder to kill me, And so played for 3 years. And then I was kind of like, I was able to make up my scholarships academically, and so I switched it over. But in the beginning of college, my first semester of college, I got a 0.6 GPA. And it wasn't because I was like a loser. It was just because I actually loved college so much. Like I was at every student gathering, every event, every sporting event, I just didn't go to class. So I was able to turn that around pretty quick. But yeah, went to college and got married and got stuck.
I love that too. And I love that. Yeah. I always recall the story of how you met your wife, or I guess how you should say you introduced yourself to your wife, which is amazing, by the way. You guys will make sure you go and search Timmy Riggs so you can find that video, because it is hysterical how he meets his wife. You grew up in Florida. You were the youngest of three, right?
I was, yeah. So my sister's 13 years older, and then my brother's 6 years older. So pretty big gaps. So my parents are older, but they're all in Florida. All of them are still there with their families and living it up, living the dream. And I'm here.
And I'm here. Well, what I think is fascinating about that, there's always kind of this piece of, the youngest child is kind of the baby. You have privileges that other children don't have. So you kind of have that going against you. And then on top of that, you also have the title of PK, pastor's kid, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like for you growing up, what kind of kid were you? Were you the good, diligent? It sounds like you might have been, even kind of knowing you, it sounds like you're kind of the adventurous. You like to go out, you like to do things. I feel like you maybe have gotten in trouble a couple times, like maybe a handful.
Yeah. So, it's kind of, there's a lot of facets to that. I was adventurous for sure, and made friends with all the neighborhood kids, and we lived just off of a golf course, so we'd go over the golf course and golf ball hunt, clean the balls up, sell them back to guys on the hole, and it was the same kind of deal as streakers. Like, those guys didn't need the balls, but they'd buy them from us just because they wanted to, support some little entrepreneurial 12-year-olds, So always was adventurous in that aspect for sure. As far as like behavior, like I was actually a really good kid because I had so much freedom, and just somehow it clicked. You don't want to lose this freedom. So don't do drugs, don't drink, whatever, the things that kids do that make them get in trouble.
Yeah.
And so was always kind of really focused on that. And I love my parents, so I didn't really want to disappoint them. And from like 10 to 18, there was a lot going on with my family. My sister's family, she just was going through a lot of hard times. And my parents were really involved in helping with them. And everything's really great now. And it wasn't that I was neglected. It just was like, hey, you're a good kid. We love you.
They don't have to worry about you.
Yeah. So a lot of freedom, and got really close to some other friends' families that weren't involved in our church. Like, they were just neighborhood families, And so kind of got like a PK lifestyle. And I'm from a Nazarene denomination. It's like Methodist. I don't know. It's great. But there's all the cons that come with it too, pretty microed in, pretty zoomed. You live in a glass house, all this stuff. So I got to learn some of that stuff that I didn't love about church community, but then I also did get to learn what it's like to live in a household that is Christ-centered and true Christian principles. And hey, this is where we're going, whether people are coming with us or not, And then I also got to see all my friends' dads. I had two really close friends. Both of their dads owned really large companies. And so I got to see kind of a whole nother world too, like not anti-Christian or not, like kind of indifferent to the church world. It was business world and what it looks like to have 500 employees and put on a gala, and my friend's family, put me in a tuxedo and going to the gala at 13 years old and being a part of it. And, so like I just got this wide range of what life can look like. And I think that pulled even more adventure out of me,
Wow. I think as parents, like, it's important to shield your kids and to make sure that they're safe. And children really do drink the Kool-Aid of whatever they're around. And so it's important to make sure you have the right people around your kids. But at the same time, I think that we do it to such an extreme that we don't allow our kids opportunities to see different aspects of life. Like, just recently I was talking with, she was a nurse, and she said, oh, you got to make sure that you put away that money for that college tuition so they can go to college. And I was looking at her, I was like, well, there's a lot of other jobs that I think my kids would actually be really good at. Like, looking at my son and going, he might actually be like a really good plumber or electrician or something like that, something within the trades, or maybe even something completely wildly different. But we get so caught up in this thought process of this is the way it has to go. And so I think it's really cool that you kind of had that really upbringing, that you got to experience a lot of different things. In fact, entrepreneurship, I would say, is probably a big aspect of your story, from selling golf balls and then maybe a little bit of a high, was there actually something throughout your life that you can kind of say, like, this was kind of my entrepreneurial gig here of golf balls, and then it was here? And because I find that, like, really good entrepreneurs, there are seeds early on in their life where you can point back and they go, yeah, they were constantly looking how they could solve a problem or help other people or fill in the blank. What were some of those entrepreneurial things that you remember growing up or even throughout your life that you go, yeah, it's kind of always been there?
Yeah, so I remember, I had a little desk in my room, and I literally remember being 10 years old, and my dad had gone from his first flip phone to something else. So he gave me the flip phone. It's just dead, right? Like it didn't work or anything, right? Like he just let me play with it. And I remember sitting at my desk, having a planner out, having a flip phone, pretending to make business calls. Like I'm literally, like I don't even, and then I also in that, because I love speaking, I would also be pretending to give speeches like to, things in my room. Like I'm giving a giant conference speech. So like, even before I even actually started like selling things, that was it. Right. 11, 12 years old. I'm in middle school. We're doing golf balls. We're going door to door and detailing cars. And again, probably just doing horrible at it, but people just respecting the game, right? Like that's how, like if a little kid comes to my door and is selling me something, if they like somewhat give me like a good talk, like they look me in the eyes and they're talking to me, like I'm going to buy it because it's just like, yes, like you're doing it, right? In middle school, I started selling large volumes of candy out of my locker. My mom would take me to Sam's and she did it the right way. She's like, I'm going to buy all this candy the first time and you're going to pay me back with the proceeds. And then you're going to buy more with the money you make. And then it's yours, And I did that for about 6 months and I was selling Starburst and I actually had like a big friend. And so we just pretended he was like my security, and I was selling a lot of stuff. And eventually I got called into the principal's office. My parents had to come and they just said like, you can't do this. We have vending machines. Cause I was undercutting the vending machines, and B, they were like, if you're doing this, other kids can do it. And I'm like, that's called capitalism, So like, honestly, even in that moment, I'm like, yeah, let them do it. Like I got the best candy shop in town, like, and then high school, like more of just the different things. Again, my friend's dad who owned the big business, he hired us for a lot of stuff. But he was always instilling entrepreneurial things in us, even when we were working for him. And then college, I didn't really do much, because I just wanted to be in college. And then after that, it's kind of basically pastor. And then even pastoring, when I was pastoring the college group, it's like I had my own mini church, because it was separate. And college ministry is great because you're not dealing with, they don't give money. Okay. Yeah. So they don't have any expectation.
Well, they don't have money to give to be.
Yeah.
Everything's paid for by mom and dad, or they're going out and working and it's mostly going to school or food.
That's right. So anything I would do, it was always going to be kind of fun, even services. And so like they were bought in and they were having fun. So you don't have to deal with them complaining about anything, right? My service was always super late. It was like 9 p.m. So it worked their schedule. They weren't like regular church people that are older and might be complaining about the colors of the seats or whatever, the loudness of the
music. Yeah.
And then they weren't youth kids, so I didn't have to deal with their parents. So it was like the sweet spot, right? So even in college ministry, I was pretty entrepreneurial. Even in that job, I had a ton of freedom. I got to do it the way that I saw fit, And so, yeah, I would say there's very clear, especially now hitting 31, I can look back and be like, yeah, it makes sense that I'm who I am.
Well, and even during the college ministry stuff, like you had a vision kind of where you wanted to go, of what you're doing right now, and even what you're transitioning into more full time, of being someone who speaks and mentors and coaches other people. And so even back then, you were looking at equipment that you could use and start to acquire. And there was a really great opportunity between you and the church that you were serving with, that they were willing to allow you to get these things and part with those things, which is how you've kind of built up over time. It's funny because people look at my studio sometimes and they're like, oh, wow, like you just dropped all this money one day. It's like, no, this is like 12 years of acquiring things. It's yes. 12 years of, I got that mic at this point and I got that camera over here. And so it's actually kind of cool because as you've set your sight on things in the future, you've also seen opportunities where you are right now that you could start to lean into and grow yourself. I am curious, in going back to kind of the entrepreneur piece, What was the motivation, do you think, early on, like selling candy or getting golf balls? Was it making the money? Was it making the sale? Was it the interaction with people? What was the thing that kind of lit you on fire when you were doing entrepreneurial thing?
Yeah, I definitely like the money. I know that sometimes people will try to go a more admirable route, and I'm like, I like the fact that you were like an hourly wage sounds tough to me. Now, my wife, she's like, no. Give me a job, give me a task, and tell me this is how much I'm going to make an hour, and I'm good. And so I'm like, great. Because I used to think everyone thought like me, you know? And so I'd always be, well, you got to do this. And it's like, no, dude. Like, and my wife's a great example of that. Like, loves her job, loves what she's doing. Boom, 8 to 5. Like, that's the way it is. For me, it's, I don't ever want a ceiling. In middle school, selling golf balls, I didn't know that. Yeah. But it's later in life where I figured out, like, I don't want a ceiling. I like control. So how can I do that in a healthy way? In a way that's not just I'm a control freak, but hey, I am driving this boat when it comes to my business or whatever. Yeah. And then, you know, just the money, like just you can make more, like Christmas lights, the amount of money that I make in an hour, like I couldn't do that unless I was a doctor. I don't know, you know, there's just, and again, it's not like I want to do Christmas lights forever, but it's just, where's the opportunity?
Who do you think taught you to look for opportunity? There are people who look for problems, and then there's people who look for opportunities to fix something, to sell something, to make things better. And then there are the people that kind of focus on the problem, like, this is what's going to happen. This is horrible. Not even just in the moment of like, this is not good in my life. They also look into the future, and they almost fantasize of all the horrible things that could possibly go wrong. Have you always kind of had that positive demeanor in your life, or do you think you gleaned that specifically from someone in your life?
So the positivity, it's both. It's yes, it is my default setting, but also it's my dad. My dad is a pastor. You know, we didn't have a lot of money, and he'd be the first to say the money we did have, he probably didn't manage well, but he knew what you should do, and he would teach that. And I know everyone's like, people don't learn what you say, they learn what you do. But I'm like, my dad is so pure that if he said something, I was like, he's right. I know he's not doing, I know we've got campers and we just went on that vacation with a credit card, but like, I know that he knows what the right thing to do is, you know? And so when I was really young, I remember I wanted to buy a BB gun, and my dad was like, you know, son, I think you're at the age where you should start thinking about assets versus liabilities. And I'm like, oh, like your camper, you know, like, and so he was already like kind of and again, you're sitting there. It's weird because I can remember being in the car driving the way we were going and having that conversation. But like in that moment, it wasn't that life changing, but it's like compounded, you know, those words. Right. And so my dad has always been so positive, just, hey, things are going to work out. It's going to be fine. He's so peaceful. I tell people, at least I haven't seen my dad sin in the last 31 years. So that's my whole life. I don't know if he's doing it secretly or what, but he's just so great. And so, and my mom too. I mean, she's amazing as well, but she was different in the sense of my dad. It was that personality of just, hey, things are going up and to the right. My mom would wake me up in the morning and basically be like, hey, champion, like, you're going to have a great day. I love you. I'd have notes in my lunchbox. Like, you can do anything, right? Like, so she was constantly like pounding that stuff into me. To this day, anything I do, they're like, that was the best. I've never seen it done better. I'm like, well, you know, there's 7 billion other people that don't know I exist, but thank you, you know. And then connected to that, my friend's dad. So his name is Bob, and he owned a geology company. And Bob was just kind of always teaching us along the way too. And just little things, right? Like, you know, we would go on vacations and stuff. And one time we were on vacation, and he had a big boat. He had a 66-foot sport fishing yacht, and we spent a lot of time on it. Some of my best memories. I pinch myself thinking that that's how I grew up, you know, and just fishing all the time, sleeping on the boat. But there would be much bigger boats in the, 100 footers, you know, 150 footers, the ones that the Instagram people make you want to think that they live on, and they don't, because they're just taking an hour photo session on it. And we'd be like, wow, that boat's amazing. And Bob would then be like, let me explain to you like the life it takes to have that boat. And so then he'd be like, is that a life you want or isn't it? And usually he's getting into the nitty gritty of like, his business needs to be this big. It's going to mean that his family has this X amount of time with him, which is very little amount of time. Like, he would just kind of break it all down to where you're like, okay, like that shiny thing is cool, but maybe there's a more meaningful way of doing life. And Bob's kind of doing that. And so it's like, you can be successful and you can also have a great family and all the things you said earlier, just like, hey, how are you going to stay anchored and not get caught up in the next best thing, right? And so all of those things, to circle it back around, are a huge part of why I think I'm like, hey, today's great. It's all I have. I'm good with everything I have. I still believe life can keep getting better, and we're just going to keep moving forward.
I think what's really amazing about your story is the number of people who have spoken into your life, the people who have, and not just like, it's important to have good mentors in our life, but like what you were just saying about your dad may not have done everything perfect, but he knew the way to do it. And he still taught you the right way to do it. And as you were talking about, like when you were when you were a kid and you wanted to get your first BB gun, and your dad telling you, maybe we should start investing in other things. It's funny because I went back to a time in my childhood when I wanted a bow and arrow, and my mother was like, absolutely not. What are you going to shoot? Your sisters? I'm like, maybe. Yeah. But I remember saving up money, trying to figure out how I was going to ask my dad, because I knew my dad was the one that I had to ask in order to get it, because my mom was never going to say yes. And I planned everything out. Like, I love my dad. My dad's an entrepreneur, but I don't think I ever learned entrepreneurship from my dad. And so there's those moments where I look at those times and I go, man, like if my father had taught me entrepreneurship at a younger age, like I think he tried. Maybe I was just a little too dull. Like he was trying to teach me how to mow lawns, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go play a video game. There's something about that as a parent, like right now, where you look at your kids and you are constant. I don't know if you're like that. I am like this, where I'm constantly trying to figure out how do I teach them the things that maybe I didn't know at their age. Like, when you become a parent, it sounds cliche, but things really do change the way that you view life. I'm curious for you, you've got two little ones. What were some of those things that started to change for you when you started to have your kids? I think specifically your daughter first. I think I had a daughter first, and like she rocked my world in terms of understanding like, oh, I've got to change because I'm a selfish person. I need to be a better dad. I'm curious, what were some of those things for you that you've started to grasp onto of identity of like, this is who I need to actually be in order to teach my kids?
You're right. The selfishness part, I think it's fine if someone chooses not to have kids or doesn't have kids. Personally, I know it would be a lot harder for me to become a better person without them. I mean, the constant friction, the constant reminding myself that I'm dead last in this group of people that I'm helping lead, right? Like, and it's just the way it is. And it's this reminder of, I meet a 70-year-old guy. Okay, let's just pick on guys. And one is really sweet. And one is really kind and just seems he's always going last. He's going to get his food last. He's going to stay in a hotel. I mean, these are things that have happened with me, right? You're going to stay in a hotel and he's going to say, hey, I'll sleep on the trundle bed. Like, you guys get the bed, like whatever. And you're just like, man, I just want, like, every time I see him, I've got a particular person in my mind right now. When I see him, he grabs my hand. He tells me how much he loves me. He's nothing but encouraging. And then I've also met 70-year-old dudes that are the worst. Like, I'm just like, you suck. You're mean. You look mean. Your face is already telling me, and that's not always the case. Yeah. But these guys in my head, that's the case. And it's this idea of like being better at 70. I saw that somewhere where guys had it tattooed on them or whatever. I think it was Justin Bieber and his pastors, but they started using this phrase of better at 70. So like every day I want to get sweeter. Every day I want to get kinder. And I think about these caricatures I have in my mind, and I'm like, yeah, like they probably both had kids, but how are you allowing that friction to carve out things in your life, attributes in your life? If you're angry because your kids turn a tantrum, which is really easy, and that happens to me all the time, am I going to get angrier, or am I going to hear my wife say, hey, we've got to stay calm? And I hate hearing that. And then you're like, but she's right. And I've got to stay calm. And what happens is it's little drops that, eventually I won't have to think about it. And it's just going to be who I am, probably at 70. But like, it's just this, whew, like you can either get better or not. And it's your choice. And so that's one of the things for sure with kids. I would say my ambition hasn't gone away. It feels different.
Controlled more?
Yeah. Like, and maybe even has more meaning and purpose. I think it's this idea I think about all the time with the direction. I mean, of course, with my daughter as well, but even now having a son, which both times we didn't know what our kids were going to be. And that was really fun. But even having a son, now that I'm trying to build a, company dedicated to men at the time being, maybe it'll evolve or whatever. But it is this idea of like, how do I want Chapman to see the men in his life? And how do I want to help lead him in his life? And so it's, yes, I want to build a really cool, awesome, big company. That's great. But it's like the heart is even more important. And the bottom line is if that doesn't happen, this still will because of the process. Those are probably the biggest things. Your selfishness is beat out, and then a new stewardship of ambition.
I love what you say because, like, even in my own life, like my kids are a mirror. Like when they walk around and they say something, and I'm like, "Oof, I know that's exactly my tone and what I say to you." And there's that challenging moment where you go, oh, I gotta change. I gotta be better than what I'm doing right now. But then there's also the flip side of things. I think we can be hard on ourselves as parents, that we look at all the bad characteristics. We say, oh my gosh, our kids are going to be ruined because they have all of my bad characteristics. But then you can also look at them in the same flip way and saying, my gosh, my daughter actually loves to talk and she loves to listen to people and communicate. She loves to help people. She's the other day, normally when I say, hey, let's come upstairs and go have dinner, like my daughter's like bolting up the stairs because she's got to be first. She has to be first. She gets that from me. Well, just the other day, I say, hey, come up to dinner. And our youngest is 1.5 and he's like barely getting up the stairs by himself. And she stopped. And she grabbed his hand and she walked him up the stairs. And I'm like, where did you get that from? Was that me? Did I do something?
It's working.
It's working. And then, 5 seconds later, like it's, she's got another bad characteristic or trait that I have. But there really is this balancing pole that we see with our kids that we go, these are the aspects of my life that are really good that I want to speak life into. And then here's some things that I really also want to change. One of the things that I think is also really interesting about you is this mantra. You've been living this mantra out, and we were even talking about it before we started. And it's the mantra of in the meantime. You have a podcast about life in the meantime, and there's something powerful to in the meantime. We're all in the meantime. You've said that before. What does that mean to live in the meantime? Because so many of us, I think, in the world are living in the future, or we live in the past. We don't know what the meantime is. What would you say to the person that doesn't really understand what the meantime is, and how do you transition from the meantime forward?
Yeah. So, in the meantime comes from my own painful experiences in the sense of wanting to get to the next thing. You've heard the phrase, obviously, but it's like, hey, next month we're going to go on this vacation, but in the meantime, we're going to be doing this, right? Next year, I hope to get that raise. Well, in the meantime, X, and for me, there was seasons in my life where I was ready to get out of it, whether it was a certain job or what, and I was just I didn't like the space and the environment, and even necessarily, not always, but sometimes the people that you're around. And you're just ready to get to the next thing. Well, as I started to get older and I'd look back at pictures, thanks to our phones, of that time period, I'd be like, wow, we did that thing. We went on that hike. And I really loved that moment. And part of that moment was wasted because I was so worried and anxious and stressed about some of these other things. I don't even think about those things now. And now I just wish I was in that picture enjoying the moment. And so I think that is everyone's in the meantime. Everyone's got the next there, right? Whatever there is for them, whether it's a goal, an accomplishment, a new type of freedom, whatever it is. And so how in the meantime do we focus on enjoying the here while getting there? And it also just connected so much to, Jesus and Matthew 6, towards the later half of Matthew 6, just that idea of like, man, what are you worried about? Like, look at the birds in the air. Look at the flowers in the field. Like, God loves you so much more than that. And so don't you know he's going to take care of you? Like no one's gotten taller by staring in the mirror. Like just live your life, enjoy today. And, for me, that's always been a verse, and that's always been something I've thought about. And in the meantime has been something I've thought about my whole life because I've always struggled at it. And so it's really this like, hey, what are you teaching? Well, the things that I had to learn myself, So yeah, in the meantime, enjoy the here while you're trying to get there. And this realization of, man, you got one life. Do I think that God's going to redeem it, after we die? I do. I don't know what that looks like. I haven't done it before. So all I know is he's given me this, right? And so I don't want to waste it being worried or stressed or anxious. Are those things going to come up? Sure. But like, it doesn't have to be my default emotion in life. The real key is getting peace and joy in your meantime. And we can get into kind of how I think we do that best. But that's kind of what In the Meantime is all about.
Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to dive into that because it's interesting because I'm in a phase of life right now where there's a lot going on. We were talking about that earlier. There's stuff going on with my wife. There's stuff going on with my kids. I'm juggling. I feel like I was the juggler, and then all of a sudden, like the audience was like, "Hey, can he juggle all of our keys at the same time?" And everyone's throwing their keys. How have you discovered to have peace and have joy? Even this morning, it was interesting because that was one of my prayers. I woke up this morning, I was thinking, okay, God, this is another day. This is another day where probably some things aren't going to go exactly the way that I planned it. Lord, give me joy and give me peace in this day. Literally, that was my prayer this morning, and also wisdom, because I need all the wisdom I can get to make it through the day. I'm curious for you. How have you discovered to live with that peace, to live with joy in the day-to-day moments where maybe things aren't going well? It's easy to do it in the good stuff, right? It's also really difficult to remember those things in the moment of things not going the way you wanted.
My wife's amazing, and our best friends live next door. So my Casey is the husband, and Kate's next door, his wife. Casey was my freshman roommate, and we actually weren't that close throughout college after that, but ended up getting on staff together at a church, lived in the same apartments, were saving a ton of money. We were like, let's try and find houses in the same neighborhood. And we're like, oh, that's funny. Yeah. And then we were like looking at these new builds, and we were like, what if we just pick lots next to each other, So we did that, and we actually took down the middle fence in the backyard. And it's a cheat code. Now, it might not be for everybody. We knew our vibe was going to work out, I don't know. I don't know if everyone should go move next to their best friends, but it's worked for us. They keep me accountable in the sense of we do it for each other. But there's not a time. There's not a pretty much every day we're like, we're blessed, man. We just live a top percent life, and am I worried about the bills? Yeah. Am I worried about, daycare payments and my kids doing okay there and stuff? Absolutely. But I got a great marriage, I got great friends. We got a nice place to live. And that right there, it is a lot more than a lot of people. And not that it's the comparison, but it's just, what do you have to be grateful for? And it's a lot. And being relentlessly intentional, and I'm not surprised I get emotional like that. And it happens a lot. We'll literally be sitting around, and we're just, one of us will say, hey, let me be the first to say we're blessed, right? Like it's a joke. It's an inside joke. And so that is accountability of what's your intention in life. My intention is to live peaceful and joyful in the meantime. And I have people around me that are going to check me, because another thing about me that's interesting, and I don't know if it's coming off, I'm pretty aggressive. So like, I am happy, I am joyful, but I can be aggressive. And sometimes my tone can be too aggressive. To me, I'm not trying to, it's just the way I sound, and luckily my wife will say, hey, bring the tone down or bring the aggression down or whatever. And our friends, they'll call me on it too, So I think that, just realizing how amazing my life is with all the ups and downs. And I know that sounds so, I think everybody can find something, right? Like, and it's the talks I give a lot where I'm like, there are things in your life. And if someone comes up, well, you don't understand, my parents were abusive. And I'm like, that sucks. And I'm so sorry. Like, I hate that. And it's like, yeah, and I don't have a lot of close friends. And, you know, the list of things not to be grateful for. And I'm like, I understand. You're talking to me. You're looking at me. Your heart's beating and you're not thinking about it. You've got breath in your lungs. And I don't want to seem insulting, but those are really insanely amazing things that you can be grateful for. So taking it all the way from macro to micro as much as possible. And then as far as the formula goes, I have a formula for, okay, how do we live in the meantime? And if you are someone who doesn't love disciplines or healthy habits and you don't like hearing about them, my formula is not for you. It's definitely a belief that discipline equals freedom. The moments in my life where I'm not as disciplined as I feel like I should be, I also feel more anxious, more worried, more stressed than ever before. For me, it's discipline and a focus of growth around the 3 pillars. So in the meantime, it's about mind, money, movement. I think if we're healthy in our mindset and our money and our movement, then overall our life can be pretty healthy. And each one of those has 2 components. So for mind, it's mindset and faith. For money, it's your vocation. So trying to figure out how to work your career into more than just a career, but it be something you're passionate about. It's fulfilling. Even if it's a job you don't like. I mean, I always tell people, like, there's a couple things you can do inside of it that you do like, and you can give that your best. And maybe you've read Horst Schultz's Excellence Wins book, but he kind of talks about, that was a game changer for me. It's this idea of when you go to work, whether you hate your job or not, you're a human being. You're not a machine. Machines go and they do a task, okay? But you're a human being, which means you get to create, right? This chair works. My car works. You get to create. Yeah, you're just sweeping floors in the restaurant at night because you're the busboy. How can you do it really efficiently? How can you do it in a way that is impactful for the people around you? Maybe you start whistling, right, while you're sweeping, and you start to impact the bartender or the other waitress or whatever. Like, there's so many ways that you can change your life in 6 months, right? So vocation is under money, and then obviously management. I'm real big on anti-debt. I have a house mortgage. Other than that, no debt. And that's personal because every time I had debt, I don't like it. I don't feel peace. I don't feel joy. I hate it. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, I want, because even when you're like figuring this stuff out, you're like, what do I really believe? Like, maybe I'm cool with having a bunch of debt, right? I've had rental properties. I don't love it. I don't like, if I had them paid off in full and I was just getting paid cash, great. But like, I was stressed about something breaking and I was stressed about someone not paying and all this stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, it's not worth it. Like, I want peace and joy, right? So vocation, money management, and then movement is twofold. And that's physical, which is going to be, I just do, especially as a man, if I don't do something physically tough in a day, I don't sleep as well. I'm a little bit more angry, whatever. And then when I say tough, I just mean maybe it's just going out for a walk, right? Like, and there's so many benefits of doing things like that. But your physical is going to be literally your movement, but also your diet. How are you eating? I'm a huge believer in what we eat affects who we are. I just crushed a bag of Doritos yesterday. So I'm still eating junk food. I still love pizza. I'm a ratio guy. I'm like, hey, as long as you're batting 36 out of 42 of the week, like, you're doing great. Have the pizza, enjoy it, eat the cheeseburger, but have the salad too, And then also under movement is relational. So how are you moving physically, but how are you moving relationally? What does your network look like? What are your friendships like? Are you pulling each other up? Are you pushing each other down? And so 3 pillars and then the 6 components under it. And really all of them have to do with, how do I just get a little bit more intentional, a little bit more focused, and how can I begin to implement one healthy practice in this area for the next quarter, the next 6 months? I told my wife, I was like, everybody could change their life in 5 years. Everybody could totally change their life and get everything that they want, right? Ish, in 5 years. And I was like, everybody could get out of debt in 5 years. Everybody could get a better job. Everybody could be physically healthy. And she's like, yeah, but that's a long time. I'm like, but it's not. Because 5 years goes like this. My thing is, how can we make some of these habits kind of so tiny that like it doesn't seem like it's taking a whole lot of effort, but you have committed to a higher vision that might take a little bit more time, and that you're going to have a much bigger reward at the end of 5 years than saying, let me do this 90-day challenge where I lose 12 pounds and then I gain 15 back afterwards, because it really wasn't a fix of the, problem, just the symptom. Right. And so for me, in the meantime, it's a journey. It's the whole thing is a journey. It's a lifestyle. It's a philosophy. It's practices. It's not a get quick fix.
No. It's so funny that you say aggressive. Like, people would look at you, and I don't know if you can catch this, but maybe I come off a little aggressive. And it's funny because I think we're both in that same vein. My wife is constantly telling me, like, tone it down, like you're yelling, and I'm like, I'm like, this is important. And
I'm passionate.
I'm not, and it's not even that I'm literally yelling. It's just tone, and like, I have a big voice, and I can be pretty loud. But it's funny as you saying that. The thing that the words that kept coming to my mind when you were talking was, you have an intensity to live. You have an intensity to live right now in the moment where you are. And so many people are married to their excuses of why they can't move forward, why they can't have the things that they want, why they can't get out of debt. And they're just stuck and married to the idea that has been ruminating in their mind forever. And they needed to divorce it, the excuse, and marry the vision for an intense life that Timmy's talking about. Each and every one of us right now need to spend time falling in love with the vision of what we could have, that we could change our life in the next 5 years. 5 years. Yeah. It sounds like a long time. Timmy, you paid off $126,000 in debt, 6 years. That seems insurmountable to most people. In fact, most people probably have that amount of debt in the back, and they're going, well, I'm just going to slowly chunk away at it at the minimum payment. And, maybe one day when I'm 80, I'll be done with the payment. No, like, live your life with an intensity to live out every single moment. Timmy, like, I want to thank you so much for jumping on, for sharing your story. I do have another question here before we jump off, but for all of you guys listening, I really want to encourage you, take a moment, go find Timmy on Instagram, find him on YouTube, follow him. He has some amazing content. Go listen to his podcast in the meantime. You are not going to regret following him and checking out the things that he is doing. Not only that, if you're a guy looking for some strong community of men, go check out In the Meantime Weekend Retreat. It is a powerful retreat where you will go, you'll be surrounded by guys who want to live their life right now in the meantime while they're moving towards something else. And I think we're all moving towards something, but sometimes we need a community of people around us to encourage us to be able to walk in the muck that we have. Timmy, one of the things I really love about your story really is this tenacity to jump out and to do things that maybe are unexpected, to make the shift, right? Like being a youth pastor, a college pastor for 6 years, and then jumping out into the great unknown to be an entrepreneur, to start a window cleaning business. And then on top of that, now you're starting to jump out again. So many people, and I think it comes back to what you were talking about, they lose the focus of the right now. What is happening right now in their life, and they're missing the opportunities of how they could improve life because they're distracted by everything. How do you know, gut-wise, when to follow your gut to make that jump? And when do you know to maybe take a step back? What's the checks and balance that you have in your life when you have a gut feeling of, you know what? I really feel like I should get into the yacht business. And
I've thought about it.
Yeah.
I have thought about it.
How do you make those checks and balances to make sure that you don't follow every single gut moment, but you find the ones that are most important that will actually drive you closer to where you should be?
Yeah, so great question. And I just talked to a guy, kind of a coaching session a couple days ago about this. For me, it's 12 to 18 months. Is this little gut feeling something that has not left me for over 12 to 18 months? In the meantime, the brand has been something I have ruminated on for, nearly a decade now. And it's crazy. Like it's silly because on one hand, it feels like I'm starting some new things, to all my friends, they're like, no, you're just adding, you're adding the community, you're adding you're not starting anything new. I just haven't officially had the LLC until now. Right. So it's like, in my mind, it feels official. To them, they're like, this is what you've been doing. And so I think if it does not leave you, if you're thinking about it almost daily, then it's a good time to go for it. And maybe during that 18 months, you're investigating a few things, right? And having conversations. I will say, I have asked people when we talked earlier about mentors. I feel blessed. I have a lazy Susan of mentors, people that I can just, okay, who do I want to call today? Right. And pick off the shelf. But I seek it. And so I think that's important too. And then you also have to seek it in a non-weird way, right? You don't just ask someone to be your mentor or whatever. Like, we know that stuff. It's proximity, the proximity principle. You just start finding yourself in the areas that they're in. And so I have asked mentors before, what do you see in me? Why do you like me? What's my sauce? And so when you start hearing some of the same things, right, and it lines up with that gut feeling, do some things that you can investigate it. So you're not going all in, right? You're not betting the farm. You're not whatever. And so, for instance, let's just say when I got to my church, there's about 2,000 people there, the church I was at before. I knew I wanted to get good at preaching. I have a desire to, open up scripture and show people different perspectives. I love public speaking. I have a desire to be a corporate public speaker on these types of topics. When I got to the church and I'm 24 years old, I'm not going to get up there and preach on Sunday to 2,000 people. So I said, hey, every single announcement that I can take, I volunteer. I want it. Okay. And I remember first announcement in front of 2,000 people, my leg was shaking so bad, and went up there, started doing announcements, started getting better at it. Right. And so that dream of being a great preacher, great speaker was taking form before I ever gave my first sermon to a large congregation. I was doing youth talks and things like that, but and then you step in. I was 26. I was the youngest person ever, which is kind of cool at this church to have ever preached on a Sunday. And so then once you've done that, you've done some of those things to investigate, and you're saying, I'm following my gut. I can't stop thinking about it. I'm working aggressively to figure out if I can get better at it. Now it's the proof of concept. What's my feedback? And I'm addicted to feedback. I want people to tell, and I, you have to be really careful because feedback is also a strength that you have to learn how to, I want someone to give me, when did you want to fall asleep during my talk? When did you, right? Well, I can't take every single piece at 100% face value. Everybody's different. So everything you hear, you still have to filter it, right? But are you getting enough, dude, you're a good speaker. I really enjoyed listening. You got me when you said this. I'd never heard that before. Are you starting to get enough of that? Because now you're getting proof of concept. And so then is there little things, right? So let's move from speaking to the Meantime Company. And this dream, basically what I'm working on now is starting a community, online community. A lot of people are doing it. The difference that I'm trying to do is I'm not your guru. I'm kind of like a Sherpa. I'm walking with you. So it's essentially a book club on steroids. We'll have a monthly theme, monthly book, one monthly get together where we do an exercise, ice plunge, hot tubs, talk about our lives. Right. So, it's not so much of, let me teach you how much better my life is than yours, but we're moving this direction together. It's nerve wracking. I've been sitting on that for 2 years and I haven't pulled the trigger until right now. Part of it was I threw my first weekend retreat. Is anybody going to come? It was $350. Not that expensive, but not nothing. $350, It's a 3-day weekend. Our guy's going to drive there. Are they going to want to go to the cabin? I'll never know if I don't do it. And I've got to follow my gut. I had 10 guys sign up. 2 of them ended up not being able to go for legitimate reasons. One's father passed away and the other one had kidney stones. So I'm like, yeah, they weren't just playing Madden. Yeah. So there's proof of concept. I had 8 guys pay me and came to my weekend retreat and believed in what I was doing and all gave me really good feedback. Both, hey, this could be better and this was great. And so I have now okay, for 2 years, I've been thinking about starting this community. I get guys together to run. I'm already doing this stuff. I have proof of concept. It might go really, really slow at first, but I think it's time to start it, right? So like I've got enough things pointing me in the direction of it being a yes. I think that's important because you're right. Some people say, I've got this gut feeling, and you're like, yeah, you're not going to make it in Hollywood, dude. Like, don't go, right? Like, and they're like, oh, you're just a hater. No, you're just not an actor. Like, that's just the bottom line, right? Like, and so now if everyone's saying like, dude, you're so funny, your skits are hilarious that you put on Instagram and blah, 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 like, awesome. But, it's just the evidence, and closing thought on this, which whatever you're going to do, right? Bob, a piece of information I'll never forget. I was down. One of my down days while running streakers and not wanting to run streakers. I mean, this has been in the last 2.5 years in the meantime. And I call Bob and tell him, and he says, hey, you can do anything. You just can't do nothing. It's so simple, but it just like built in me. If there's nothing on my schedule for that day, make something, literally make something, create, right? For me, it also proved that the more I did that, action attracts, whatever it is, right? Like if I'm not posting, do I hate social media and think it's the devil sometimes? Absolutely. If I'm not posting, you're not thinking that I'm someone that you would like to interview on your podcast, right? Like, and posting for me is a realization of, hey, I think I'm one of the good guys and I have a good message. The worst thing that happens is I'm putting out a good message in a world that's full of bad. And so like, okay, that's still a win, right? Like even if it's just my mom and grandma hitting the like button, like I'm still getting it out there. And so just do. I know it just sounds so easy and also like oversimplified, but it's like, just do it. Every successful person says that. They all say you just got to start.
Mm. It's so powerful what you're saying. And here's what I want you guys to understand with what he's saying. You gave the most perfect picture, which is the mentor lazy Susan. You need to have a lazy Susan of mentors that you can run to for any aspect of your life, whether that's your marriage, whether that's, for being a dude or a gal, or whether that's your faith, whether that's your business. You need to have a lazy Susan of mentors that you can just roll through to find the mentor that you need in that moment, because you don't just need one mentor in your life. You need a lot of mentors in your life, and they will show up in times where they are needed and you don't even know that you need them. And then there's times where you will seek them out because you know that you need them to speak into your life. You've given multiple examples of people that have seen you or that you've gone to ask for mentorship, to ask for feedback. There was also a time, when you threw an interception and your father came and he spoke life into you. And one of the worst times that you probably could have felt, your father spoke life into you. And he knew that that's what you needed to hear in that moment. Every single aspect of your life is a moment to surround yourself with mentors who will instill in you confidence, that will help shave off the rough areas to make you better, to show up as the person you were created to be, not only in the future, but right now in the meantime. Timmy Riggs, thank you so much for jumping on the show. I know this episode is going to be absolutely crazy good for anyone that listens to it. So all of you listening, leave a comment, like this episode, share it with a friend, because this could be the episode that sparks a change in someone's life that makes the biggest difference later on down the road. Until next time, be more, see more, and experience more than before.